Joining us now is Leon Panetta, the former defense secretary, of course, former CIA director, former White House chief of staff. I could even say former budget OMB director. But, Leon, you've done it all. Let's talk about this. The criticism has been immediately after we had the president on live in this program and John Kirby from the White House. We had General McCaffrey, Baron McCaffrey, and others saying, this is not enough. It's too slow. It's the right decision, but it needs to be accelerated, and they need the ATACMS, they need the other things, they need the fighter jets in order to really go on the offensive and be able to put Vladimir Putin on his back foot.
Well, there's no question that this decision took too long. It was almost 4 months to be able to come to a decision. They came to the right decision, thankfully. I think it's very important to be able to provide these tanks to the Ukrainians in order to deal with a potential offensive by the Russians. And I think it is important to provide additional support as well. I think, frankly, everything should be on the table when it comes to trying to help the Ukrainians be able to ultimately defeat the Russians and be able to protect their democracy. And this is all, frankly, everything we're talking about is not offensive. It's defensive for the Ukrainians in order to protect their country.
The criticism is also that we are overestimating what Putin could do in escalation, that he is bluffing, and that we should not be so afraid of Putin's response. We should just give Ukraine what they need.
Well, I think there's some merit to that argument in the sense that Putin's forces are exhausted. Putin is flailing by sending these missiles. This is not any kind of war strategy. This is a pure terror strategy, trying to break the will of the Ukrainian people and break the unity of the United States and our allies. And as a consequence, I'm not sure he's got a lot of places to go. He's basically caught right now. And the issue is going to be whether or not he recognizes that ultimately, with the support that we're providing, that he's going to face a choice between whether he negotiates some kind of settlement or whether he's going to be totally defeated. That's really the choice that Putin's going to face. And frankly, it's the choice that we have to make him face. The only thing he understands, unfortunately, is force. And that's why it's important to continue to provide the Ukrainians with what they need in order to provide that force to be able to take on Putin and Russia.
Are you at all concerned about the House Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, but certainly members of his coalition who helped him become Speaker, who are saying, don't give Ukraine a blank check, we're not going to spend another dime? This is not Ronald Reagan's Republican Party, and we don't have a bipartisan consensus on Ukraine any longer.
Well, what I would say to the Republicans and the Republican leadership is that this is about national security. This is not just about Ukraine. Whatever happens in Ukraine and our ability to be able to protect a democracy in Ukraine, if we can do that, that's a very important message to send to Xi and China. If they're worried about China, the most important way to send a clear message to China that they should not go into Taiwan is to be able to be successful in Ukraine. It's the same kind of message we need to send to Kim Jong-un, and it's the same kind of message we need to send to the supreme leader in Iran. This is not just a war in Ukraine. It's a pivotal war that will determine the future of democracy in the 21st century.
I want to turn to the classified documents controversy. You're a former CIA director, White House chief of staff. You've been a cabinet secretary, obviously the defense secretary. So speak to the bipartisan frustration that leaders of the Senate Intelligence Committee offered yesterday because they refused access to any damage assessment or informal assessment or whatever is immediately, known about those classified documents in the Trump and Biden tranches rather than, of course, Mike Pence, which just happened. Listen to some of what both Warner and Rubio, the leaders of Senate Intelligence, had to say yesterday.
Every member of the committee, regardless of Democrat or Republican, were unanimous in that this position, that we are left in limbo until somehow a special counsel designates that it's okay for us to get briefed, is not going to stand.
How can we judge and conduct oversight over whether their harm assessment is accurate and or whether their mitigation efforts are sufficient if we don't know what it is, what the material that was exposed potentially is?
So, Mr. Secretary, the lawmakers are saying they were briefed in real time on the Russia investigation. Now they're getting the cold shoulder. And among other things, they need to know whether this is as obvious a systemic failure as it seems to be.
Well, they certainly have a responsibility as the Intelligence Oversight Committee to be able to determine whether or not what's happened with classified information is impacted on our national security in any way. Look, as a former CIA director, the toughest job I had was to deploy our agents into harm's way. They're out there putting their lives on the line in order to gain critical information on our adversaries, and it's about our national security. That's why this information is classified. And so the fact that we have had this kind of careless handling of classified material raises a serious question about whether any of this has impacted on our national security. So I really do hope that the administration, all of those involved, will cooperate and will be able to provide information that's critical to the Intelligence Committee. But more importantly, we need to strengthen the process of protecting our classified material. What's happened here is basically, and could be the tip of the iceberg with regards to the abuses that have taken place with regards to classified information. We are not effectively protecting our secrets, and that needs to be improved.
President Biden and former Vice President Pence have explained it by saying, well, we're cooperating. At least we're cooperating. We're not Donald Trump, who they say was obstructing, and there's plenty of evidence pointing to that. Is that a good enough explanation? What excuse is there for Mike Pence or Joe Biden, as well-intentioned as they may have been, and that we don't know that yet, to have done this?
Well, you know, I take them at their word that they will cooperate and that their lawyers and others will fully cooperate. But it's cooperating not just with the special counsel that's involved. It's cooperating with the intelligence oversight committees that have the responsibility ultimately to make sure we're protecting our national security. So I do hope that everyone recognizes that this is a moment in time where we have to be concerned about whether or not we are fully protecting the secrets and the classified information that is critical to our national security. This is a national security issue. I realize there's a lot of politics involved, but let me tell you, from the perspective of the country, this is a national security issue, and it ought to require the cooperation and the collaboration of both the administration, the Congress, and those involved in intelligence to make sure that we're doing everything necessary so that this doesn't happen again.
And I want to, speaking of national security, I want to ask you about Adam Schiff being kicked off the Intelligence Committee, former intelligence chairman, and also his declaration today that he is going to run for the Senate from your state of California.
Yeah, well, it's probably not the secret that everybody thought. I think everybody assumed. And I know that Adam was very interested in the race for the Senate. So I'm not surprised by his making the announcement that he is running. I am concerned that the expertise that he has with regards to intelligence, with regards to national security, that expertise, which is the reason he was appointed to the Intelligence Committee as the ranking member, the Republicans ought not to be afraid of that. Frankly, they ought to embrace people that have the experience and knowledge of what to do when it comes to national security issues. So I'm concerned that happened, but I wish Adam the best with regards to his race for the Senate. He's a very distinguished leader from California.
Would you endorse him if?
Pardon me?
Would you endorse him if that seat opens up?
Adam and I are very good friends, so I'm going to wait and see what Dianne Feinstein ultimately decides. But if she decides to step down, then I certainly would support Adam.
Thank you very much, Leon Panetta, Mr. Secretary. Good to see you.